So springt des Reiches Ritterschaft und ihre Schwerter blinken. Hey, ja, hey, 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 ja. Und ihre Schwerter blinken. Hey, ja, hey, 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 ja. Und ihre Schwerter blinken.
Hello and welcome to Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. I am Kenny and I am testing out my live streaming capabilities now that I can. So I don't really have anything to talk about. Like I said, this is just a test stream. But I guess the only thing I have to say is that just a reminder to anybody following me, this is actually a channel that is attempting, anyway, to inspire more tradition here in Wichita Falls so that hopefully in the future we could probably get a Latin Mass. So I'm not trying to become famous. I'm not trying to become well known. This is purely out of love for Christ that I am doing this. That's why y'all generally do not see my face. Because I want to see true worship of Christ, true worship of God the Father in the city of Wichita Falls via the Holy Latin Mass. Because back whenever I first converted to Catholicism, I ran into a few problems because obviously I came in through the Novus Ordo. And I started running into some problems. The Catholicism that I had read about, the Catholicism that I had learned, was not the Catholicism that I was seeing whenever I came into the church. But me having just become Catholic from Protestantism, I used to be a Lutheran heretic, and so for me, whenever I went into the church, saw things weren't quite the way I thought they should be because of what I had read. I was just told, oh, well, we used to do things this way, now we do things this way. And, being a fresh convert, I didn't see any problem with that at the time. But things felt off, and I did the Novus Ordo thing for years. Didn't go to confession much. I mean, I did at first, but after a while, I just stopped seeing the need for it because it just didn't seem to be taken that seriously, in all honesty. I mean, people would always talk about how you need to go to confession, but then, I'd get questioned for why I went to confession so much. But then I started doing some digging, discovered traditionalism. Almost became a sedevacantist over it, but then I ran into the Society of St. Pius X, the FSSP, and started realizing that, no, sedevacantism is not the way to go. Because even though there were problems in the church, these problems were an issue of heretics in the church. people who had tried to Protestantize the Mass, people who had tried to basically make Catholicism just one denomination among many denominations under air quotes Christians. Because one of the things you will notice is I do not call Protestants Christians. I will never call a Protestant a Christian, other than the occasional slip up, because it is an old habit. But because even though, yes, an individual Protestant may be a Christian by virtue of their baptism, Protestantism is not Christian at all in any way, shape, or form. If you're not Catholic, you're not Christian. Period. That's it. And so I won't ever call a Protestant a Christian. So, yes, again, an individual Protestant could potentially be a true Christian in ignorance, but those are very few and far between. So, anyway, as I'm going along in this journey, I start finding out about the Latin Mass, start finding out how the Latin Mass came into existence. I learned about Butanini, the problems with the Second Vatican Council, the issue of the Masons praising the Second Vatican Council, as well as the Novus Ordo. Butanini's comment about, we have to strip away anything and everything from our prayers that could be a possibility of a stumbling block for our separated brethren. These are the things that led me to traditionalism. And then, ever since then, I've taken my faith more seriously. And even though I am currently in a situation where I have no choice but to go to the Novus Ordo, I am looking to change that regardless of whether we get a Latin Mass here in Wichita Falls or not. Because it's a 2-hour drive in my current situation to get to the nearest Latin Mass. So I do go to the Novus Ordo, but I do not do the prayers in the Novus Ordo. I bring my Latin Rite Missal with me. I have a pre-55 that I use, and I pray the prayers in the pre-55. I do the readings in the pre-55, and I just do my own prayers from the traditional Latin Mass during the Novus Ordo. So, and actually, it has been very helpful. Matter of fact, I've almost forgotten how the Novus Ordo goes because I'm not really paying attention to what's being prayed in the Novus Ordo Mass. The only thing I'm paying attention to in the Novus Ordo is the fact that it's the sacrifice of the Mass. Because yes, I do believe that Novus Ordos are valid, otherwise I would not be going to them. So I just take the stance that the Novus Ordo is valid but illicit, and most definitely irreverent, very Protestant. And that was the other thing. Whenever I first became Catholic, at first I saw very little difference. I mean, yeah, there were some definite major differences in the way we talked about the faith, or the consecration, for example, praying to the saints. Those were, from a Protestant perspective, major differences. But ultimately, the Novus Ordo Mass was very, very much what I grew up with in the Lutheran Church. Like, it's almost identical to the Lutheran Mass. Or not the Lutheran Mass, but the Lutheran service. Obviously, it's not a Mass. But, so yeah, the sign of peace thing, I always hated that as a Lutheran. I always thought it was, fake. it's just like, why do I have to turn around and like say hi to everybody when we say hi to each other, before we go to church and then afterwards? I mean, I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to God. Even I had that much sense when I was a Lutheran. And then, of course, coming to the Catholic Church, doing the exact same thing. I was like, okay, that's annoying. I thought that was just, a Protestant thing, but apparently not. So then, of course, I went to the Latin Mass and found out that, like, that was not even part of the Mass. So I'm like, okay, cool. I like this. I can actually just sit and pray and not worry about the person next to me trying to, like, get their hands all feely-feelies on me. I can sit there and pray. I can talk to these people after Mass or before. I mean, I don't need to talk to them during Mass. The only person I should be talking to in Mass is either God or my wife, who will be sitting next to me. That's it. So, anyway, so yeah, that is the whole point of this channel, is I'm trying to spark traditionalism. Like I've seen some signs of it here in Wichita Falls, but it's not enough. It's just a few people that I've seen that bring their Latin Rite Missal to Mass like I do. People who are kneeling and receiving on the tongue like I do. I'm the only one I've noticed that does not do the sign of peace. I mean, I have the benefit of, since I'm doing the prayers in the Latin Mass Missal, I'm going through prayers at the time that everybody else is doing the sign of peace. So I'm sitting there praying. People like turn around like they're going to shake my hand. They see I'm praying, and then they just leave me alone. I've had a couple of occasions where people tried to get forceful and like take me away from my prayers to do it. But other than those few occasions, people generally see, okay, he's praying, leave him alone. So I do have that benefit, which is another reason why if you go to the Novus Ordo, and you're trying to follow traditionalism, you should just do the prayers in the Latin Mass Missal while you're in the Novus Ordo, because it will save you the headache of doing the sign of peace. And so, but we have to get the Latin Mass here to Wichita Falls. Really, we have to get the Latin Mass everywhere. But I live in Wichita Falls, so this is where I was born. This is where I'm from. And so I want to see the kingship of Christ return to Wichita Falls. Now, of course, many people will argue with me that Christ is already king because we have the Catholic Church here. Well, yes, technically put that way, that is true. But the problem is that Novus Ordo Catholics are very Protestant in their thinking. Not all, but most. That's why you see very long lines for the Eucharist, but you don't see hardly a line at all for confession. And when you do see a line for confession, it's mostly old people who just want somebody to talk to. And, as I said in one of my other previous videos, the Novus Ordo is dying. The young people are leaving. They're all going to the Latin Masses, or they're leaving Catholicism altogether, either for atheism or some other false religion or heretical Protestant sect. So, or worse, they go to paganism. But, you can't, uh, you cannot be Catholic when you're praying non-Catholic prayers. Hence the name of this channel, Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. The law of prayer is the law of belief. Or to be more, to clarify a little better, the way you pray is going to determine the way you believe. So if you pray like a Protestant, which is what you do in the Novus Ordo, give or take a few Catholic-y things that we say, for the most part, you're praying like a Protestant. You're acting like a Protestant. So therefore, you're going to believe like a Protestant. And you just aren't going to know it. And then, and this is why we need the Latin Mass, because if you go to the Latin Mass, all the prayers are Catholic. All the prayers are, in line with tradition and what we believe as Catholics. And so you pray like a Catholic, you're going to be a Catholic. Now again, just like with anything else, just because you're going to the Novus Ordo Mass and you're praying those prayers does not necessarily mean that each and every individual, now the majority, yes, but there will be some people, like myself, I did manage to pull myself out of that. You are going to have some people that are very Catholic, even in a Novus Ordo setting. But they're also working at it. Like, these are people that aren't satisfied with going to Mass and just listening to what the priest says or going to talks at your local Novus Ordo parish. They're going out and they're getting books. They're reading. They're reading Bellarmine. They're reading the Catechism Council of Trent. They're reading Thomas Aquinas. And, just pick out of your head all the saints. I mean, I occasionally read the Rule of St. Benedict. I may not be a Benedictine monk, but the Rule of St. Benedict is actually very good even for a layperson. I mean, obviously within reason, because you don't live in a monastery, so some of the rules don't apply to you, but they're still good. But these people work at it. So the Novus Ordo Catholics, who are actually very Catholic, they're only Catholic because they actually put the work into it. They actually go out and try to learn this stuff for themselves. They learn what Catholicism really is. And, and then it's vice versa. You can have somebody who goes to the Latin Mass and is not very Catholic at all. And it's just because they do the same thing that most Novus Ordo Catholics do, which is just go to Mass, listen to Father, and, and that's about it. They don't do any of their due diligence. They don't go and actually read this stuff. They don't, listen to videos from people who are trying to teach the faith beyond the Mass. Because if we do get the Latin Mass here, that is not, the silver bullet to take out heresy. Because all of this stuff that's going on right now started when we had the Latin Mass, when we had the pre-55. So the Latin Mass is not the thing that is going to make everything Catholic again. But reverent worship is the single most important thing. And since the Eucharist is the source of our faith, it is the central focal point of our faith, is the Mass, the Eucharist, worship of God the Father, and the offering up of His Son, for our sins, that is the focal point. And so the Latin Mass, although, again, not the silver bullet, it is of absolute importance for the purposes of worshiping God, because you're not reverently worshiping God in the Novus Ordo. I mean, even these, so-called reverent Novus Ordos, the ones that are done ad orientem with the Latin and all of that, it's the words of the Novus Ordo that make it irreverent. I mean, you can put it in Latin and it'll sound reverent, it'll look reverent, and most people who don't know any better probably would not be able to tell the difference between a Novus Ordo and a Latin Mass if you did that. But there are Protestant prayers added to the Novus Ordo. There's an emphasis on it being a meal, and there's an emphasis removed on it being a sacrifice, which was a Protestant thing, just like communion in the hand. All of that stuff was intended to destroy belief in the real presence of Christ in the Holy Eucharist. And so you will not ever be able to make the Novus Ordo reverent. You might be able to say it's valid. Well, that's assuming that there's no monkey business going on with the bread and the wine, because if it's not valid matter, I know I've brought this up before, but it was, I think, in Kansas. I'm not sure where, but anyway, it's been forever since I've heard anything about this. But it turned out that there was a particular diocese where the priests were basically getting Walmart wine. And that's not valid matter, because Walmart wine has preservatives and a whole bunch of other stuff added to it. And for valid matter, you have to have just 100% pure wine. Like, you can have like a little bit. Like, I think canon law stated that it could be like, you could only have like 2% of the wine with some kind of a preservative. And that's just for the sake of the fact that you're probably not going to find wine without preservatives unless you go to a farm where somebody's making it in their barn or something. So that was the case in this particular diocese. They were using invalid matter, invalid wine. And so all of their masses, all the masses for the dead that they had done, all of the masses that people were going to were invalid. All their first communions were invalid. Anything that involved the mass was invalid. And so, well, I do have to make one clarification. The mass is not necessary for holy matrimony. So if anybody was married and the mass was invalid, the mass would have been invalid. The Eucharist they took would have been invalid, but their marriage would have been totally cool. But anyway, that's a huge problem with the Novus Ordo, is that there's so much monkey business. Like the fact that you have so many options. That's what was great about the Latin Mass, is there were no options. You just basically said the black, did the red. That was it. And I mean, I don't know how else to say it other than, Catholicism, if it does not return to tradition, is going to be very small. Obviously, the Catholic Church will never go away, because the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, no matter what happens. So And that is a promise from our Lord, and he does not lie. So regardless of what happens here, regardless of what people try to turn the Mass into, regardless of what heretics might be in very high offices in the church, Christ Church will always come out on top. It's just right now, it seems that we are having a great weeding out, because the Novus Ordo parishes, like I said, are dying. The traditional parishes are growing. And the more they hammer down on traditional parishes, the more they censor us, the more they condemn us, the more they shut us down, the harder we go for it. And we'll just go underground if that's what it takes. Get the Society of St. Pius X. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. I take the position of, as long as the priest is valid and they are serving the Latin Mass and they are doing everything they can to be as Catholic as they can under their circumstances, regular or irregular, I don't do that whole like partial communion thing. Like, there's no such thing as being, partial communion or full communion. You're either in communion or you're not. The Society of St. Pius X is in an irregular situation, but they are fully Catholic and they're in full communion. So I have no problem with the society being here. Now, it may ruffle some feathers, but I'm good at ruffling feathers. I really don't care if, people get upset with what I say or do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not cautious. I mean, I'm not going to do anything intentionally to ruffle feathers. And and I may not care what anybody thinks of me, but I do realize that I have to be careful, because if I do anything too out there, then it could be detrimental to souls, to include my own. So when I do this stuff and I say the things that I say, I am not being rash. I am not being reckless about it. I may be losing patience with the Novus Ordo establishments, but I will never be rash. I will always be respectful to a priest in the Novus Ordo, because they are valid priests. Again, I would not be going to confession at a Novus Ordo if I didn't think that the priests there were valid priests. A lot of them may give bad advice. A lot of them may just absolve you regardless of how many times you've gone in for a particular sin or whatever, but they're still valid. And so I will always respect the offices of those who are in authority. The only thing I will not do is I will not follow anything that goes against tradition, because that is beyond their authority. That includes the Pope. The Pope is supposed to guard, protect, pass on tradition, and preserve it. He does not actually have the right to just come in and just change everything. The only time any priest, bishop, or whoever the Pope is at the time has any right to change anything is if it is a natural change for the good of the church, not, just some reckless, everybody likes the casual thing, so we're just going to rip all the formal stuff out and just make everything casual. We want to be like the Protestants. You can't do that. That is my clumsy, goofy, direct way of explaining that situation. Well, it's been about 30 minutes, and I'm watching my stream on my phone here while I'm doing this to see if it works. Apparently, I am the only one watching this at the moment, so everybody else, y'all have to watch it after this is done, if you watch it at all. So again, this has been a test stream. I did kind of rant a little bit. I had nothing planned, so I just kind of said whatever I wanted to this time around. But future live streams, I will plan something now that I can actually do it. Because I'm trying to think how many followers do I have now, or subscribers? Sorry, I'm still thinking like Facebook. All right, so I have 59 subscribers. That's the reason why I can live stream now. So, oh, I have 70 videos. I did not know I'd made that many already. Oh, okay. So, anyway, that is all for now. Please pray your rosary. Today is a First Friday, so get to Mass for First Friday if you have not done that. Tomorrow will be a First Saturday, and pray your rosary. Get yourself a brown scapular. Get enrolled. Find a priest that is both able and willing to do it. If you're not doing the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, I do suggest doing that. It's difficult, trust me. I've had trouble making sure that I do it every day, but I do know from past experience that whenever you do get into it and you just set alarms for it or whatever, then you can do the whole thing. Or if you're in one of those situations where you can't really do that, then of course you can, modify it, like maybe do the morning prayers, middle of the day prayers, and then evening prayers or something like that. But I do suggest doing it. It's great devotion, and it's an easy way to pray like the monks do in a, secular setting. Meaning like somebody who may be married or somebody who is just living out in the world. So, all right, well, I'm starting to ramble now. So until next time, Deus Vult.